Hi everybody, welcome to TIA Now. I'm Clarence Reynolds. Creating a security infrastructure for autonomous vehicles is a difficult task when V2V and IoT infrastructures have yet to mature, but it must be done. David Pickeral, strategic advisor to venture capital and private equity firms, is here with his insights on AV.
Thanks, Clarence.
David, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be back as always.
The big question is, David, how will AVs anticipate and defend against both traditional cyber attacks as well as the new generation of attacks, which are based on sort of the adversarial machine learning attacks?
Well, I think it's going to come as no surprise, Clarence, that they're not going to do it alone. It's really going to take a lot of resources beyond the vehicle. And I think fundamentally, the way they're going to deal with it, and you and I both have some history with the military, it's for thousands of years, everybody understands the concept of defense in depth. And the most valuable, vulnerable resource is going to be the vehicle itself. So there's going to need to be an infrastructure based on global standards, based on hardware, based on software that protects that vehicle as much as possible and frankly does as much to protect that vehicle away from the vehicle itself in the cloud. As with any other mobile device, and I've mentioned this a number of times, basically your modern connected and autonomous vehicle is basically a mobile device. And anyone in cyber will tell you, I'm not a CISP or CISM myself, but anybody in cyber will tell you end user devices, your iPad, your phone, are always the most vulnerable. So what has to happen is as much of the protection, the 24/7 monitoring, the reciprocal intelligence that's going on to deal with adaptive cyber attacks and denial of service is going to happen off the vehicle, in the cloud, in the infrastructure, in the network, rather than on the vehicle, because it's kind of going to be a problem if we get to the vehicle itself. Another way the vehicles are going to, I think, be able to defend themselves, and I'll touch on this in a couple different aspects as we talk today. Vehicles are going to need to have autonomy along with connectivity. I actually view those two as inseparable. It's not going to be either or. I like to use the word CAV, connected and autonomous vehicle. Because like any other mobile device, again, they're going to need to be getting constant pushed updates, pushed contacts, security patches constantly. But they're going to need to be autonomous, I think, when they're operating on public highways or just driving and not do software or other changes because there's too much of a risk of somebody hacking them. They need to be able to be independent because that's the only way to really ensure they're not going to be hacked. If there is a need for a critical software update, hopefully most updates can be done when the vehicle is parked and stationary somewhere. If it can't, the vehicles may have to stop, but I think that's the real key, is that they're going to have to, when vehicles aren't moving, hopefully, they download the updates. They'll probably need to validate and probably independently revalidate all updates like you do today when you update your Windows 10 or everything on your computer. So it's going to be a combination of validation and defense in depth and autonomy when the vehicle's actually rolling along the highway so that no one can hack it. If no one can reach it while it's autonomous, then no one can hack it. And I think that, in practical terms, is the only way that they're actually going to make that happen.
So will companies that develop AVs have to go through that same progression that we did with software and the internet, where the only way to learn about your vulnerabilities was to get hacked and then fix that vulnerability?
Well, hopefully not. I mean, it's not something we can afford, but I think the advantage is with the ransomware and denial of service attacks, there's a lot that the ICT industry has already learned about hacking that is just going to essentially just extend it, as I'll say again, to another family of mobile devices that it can learn about. Again, I think we just can't afford a major hacking incident, and I think the combination of depth and autonomy I talked about is going to prevent that. So hopefully there won't be a case of that being done, and again, the risk is just too high. The right people are assembling to kind of work together in terms of government and industry to make sure that that fortress is as solid as possible 24/7, and the best people in the world are recruited and trained and retained to actually deal with that so that we don't have a catastrophic incident. Because I think there's a lot that's been learned, that's been applied, and it kind of has to be, because the stakes are infinitely higher when you're dealing with vehicles versus simply bank accounts or things that can be shut down. And it's bad enough when those happen, but obviously we have takes it to a whole new level when you're dealing with buses, trains, and other things moving around over the earth.
But on that level, Auto manufacturers are still dealing with recalls on their hardware. Are they prepared for what is going to be a security situation when it comes to that kind of scale with cars and a security grid of automobiles?
I actually think, in respect to the automakers, and I think it's something they've realized in all the partnerships here, really the automakers need to focus on what automakers do best, building and designing physical vehicles. I think when you look at the automotive industry and you look at the tech industry and the ICT industry, all of them have both complementary strengths and kind of reciprocal or offsetting risks. I've worked for a lot of IT companies. I've also worked with OEMs. OEMs know how to manage the risk of building physical vehicles and crashes and vehicles that are inevitably going to get out and have an accident. I think the first car accident was about a week after Carl Benz released in 1886 the first production car. It was a fairly minor one, I seem to recall. I'm not into automotive history, but car accidents are inevitable no matter how much protection they do. Car makers focus on protecting the occupants, following international really safety standards at this point. That's what they do best. They're increasingly bringing in, with all the partnerships you see announced, to bring in the best of the tech sector to handle that. And I think they're going to both share the risks and share the benefits. I just don't think connected vehicle and connected transportation are all pretty much the most complicated human endeavor that's been undertaken, and it's going to take essentially, I call it the best of breed of all these different kinds of companies, as well as the mobile and other network operators that are going to have the resilient networks that'll carry all these data. We hear a lot about the cars, which are one end of the spectrum, and the cloud in the back office, but all that data, terabyte per vehicle is what they're saying now, is going to need to move around, so you'll also have the network people to deal with the vulnerabilities that they deal with. So they're all, I think they've gotten over the era where one segment of the industry says we're going to dominate this industry and we're going to do it all. Just not possible. And the new, I think, more mature approach is they're saying we're going to work together, we're going to collaborate, and everyone's going to build this entire ecosystem. And there's frankly value to be had for all, and consumers, and risk to be shared and apportioned across all of it.
In your opinion, is AV security a matter of public safety? And if that is the case, does government have some skin in the game?
Short answer is yes and yes. To elaborate a bit, I think it definitely, just as the governments regulate the design of vehicles, essentially in the U.S., and this is fairly typical, we have the national government responsible for overall safety standards, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and then you have the state departments of transportation, which have a lot of discretion on how vehicles are actually operated on their streets and roads, and even localities that do deal with things like parking and various other aspects of safety. So all these level of governments have, I would say, not only do they have a responsibility, it's actually what we call an inherently governmental function that they can't even delegate. You can't really privatize public safety, and it is a public safety issue because it deals with the operation of vehicles on public road and the safety of citizens that governments at all level, particularly in transportation, have been obligated to protect for hundreds of years. You can go back to the canals in the 17th century in Europe, the stagecoaches. Government weighed in pretty quickly, as some of our more modern technology companies are discovering, and basically said transportation is a heavily regulated and oversight intensive industry for a reason, and they're not going to, I don't see government delegating it. They're being very careful about regulations, and they will be intimately involved in the process because I think fundamentally they have to be as an obligation of government.
How do you think the threat model is going to evolve since today's security issues are likely going to be very different when we get into a truly autonomous environment?
Well, I think it's going to evolve very quickly, and again, to underscore the point, connected and autonomous are inseparable. The industry is going to continue to evolve very quickly. A lot of the ways they deal with the problems will evolve very quickly. So you'll have that moving very quickly. At the same point, the evolution of both ICT networks and transportation networks doesn't happen that quickly. Modes tend to come in based on decades, not years. So I think you'll have the idea of building the basic infrastructure. A lot of things will evolve quickly. I think the way the industry is going to be positioned to deal with it is kind of the way the industry deals with it now. A lot of it's going to be off the vehicle, done in the cloud. done through software rather than hardware, so that just like my iPhone, which is getting to be a few years old now, updates itself every night with different security patches, software, and apps, your vehicle will kind of be constantly renewing itself, so that you'll be able to have kind of the latest protection. It's not like you take it in every 14 years and trade it,
right.
Or when you sell it, it's going to be good for 14 years. So the idea of evolutionary and constantly shifting networks to meet both threats and offer better value-add services to consumers, which is going to create the value for industry to actually build these things, is all going to happen at once. And it'll never be at a steady state. I don't think anything in modern technology is, but certainly not vehicles, for both the value-add reasons and the fact that it has to be kept secure.
Well, David, we always learn so much when you're here, so thanks for being with us.
I was glad to be here.
And of course, we'd like to hear from you, so reach out to us on Facebook or Twitter. And of course, you can see more videos at tianow.org and on our YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.